Well, welcome everyone to GeoHug. So I'm just promoting you up as panelists. Please don't be shy. Come on through, get the cameras on, get the mics on. We have the lovely Tim Craske joining us today. But before we do get stuck into today's session, I would like to take this time to acknowledge the traditional lands which we're all coming from today. I live on the beautiful lands of the Gadigal of the people of the Aurora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and future. And yes, I'm very happy that we have Tim Craske with us today. So Tim is a mineral explorer and mentor with over 40 years experience in project generation, exploration management, and technical innovation, gained in Australia, North and South America, Asia, and East Africa. He's currently the Managing Director and Chief Facilitator for Thinker Events and the Director of thinkercafe.org that specializes in developing innovative thinkers, thinking organizations, and disruptive technology solutions for industry and government sectors. So with all of his expertise, it is going to be brilliant hearing from him today about systems thinking for geoscience. So thank you so much, Tim, for joining. I'm so grateful that we have you here today.
Well, thank you, Jess, for inviting me. I'm really honoured to have the opportunity to talk to people about my favourite subject these days, which is systems thinking, and hopefully people will get as much out of it as I do. And I would classify myself as a novice. Some of the people I work with, Bruce Hobbs and Alison Ord from CET, CSRO, maybe they're a bit more advanced, but the mastery in systems thinking is all in America, and it's not in geoscience; it's in other disciplines. So we have a long way to go, and it's really important for us in mineral exploration.
Yeah. So talking of mineral exploration, how did you get into geology in the first place?
Oh, golly. Well, if you ask my mother, when I was a 2-year-old, we lived on the Isle of Wight off Portsmouth. And I used to have the habit, because I had a good appetite, that I used to sit in front of people who were having picnics on the beach, and I would eat pebbles and sand until they took pity on me and offered me sandal.
That's amazing.
So I ingested rocks and licked rocks from the earliest possible age.
Oh my gosh, that is too good. I love that.
Yeah. So if you want a more logical and believable explanation, in my early teens, I got into making costume jewelry to make a bit of money on the side as a high school student, and I became a lot more interested in the stones than I did the jewelry making. And then I started looking for stones and buying stones and a whole lot of bad behavior. So I did have a very nice mineral collection until my mother decided to give that to the Worcester Museum when I wasn't there. But that's the trouble when you go overseas and live overseas. People at home, back home go, oh, there's a bunch of rocks in that box. Let's get rid of them.
Well, speaking of that, you did bring a pretty special pet rock with you today.
Oh, I did.
Give us a little look.
So yeah, so this is one I collected in 1999. Okay, so there we go. So what do you have to do? Anybody who can guess what this is, okay? The color as an oxide might give it away, but you'll never guess where it came from, and that's another story.
There are absolutely no guesses.
No guesses. No guesses.
Okay,
let me show you the back. Yeah,
let
me show you the back of the rock.
Nick wants to know if you can lick it.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to die if I lick it, but I'm not going to do that on a recorded screen. Sorry about that. That'll become a do loop on TikTok in the afternoon. Okay, I'll put you out of misery. Okay, this is manganese carbonate, and this is road base. This comes from a mine in Missouri, and it was where dripstone from the roof was coming down full of manganese, and it basically cemented and accreted onto the pebbles. And as you can see, these ones are quite smooth. These ones in this jar here, these were also in the same puddle, and these are cave pearls, also made out of manganese carbonate. And the core of each one of those pearls is a piece of road base. And as you can see, they're beginning to chip off, which is why I keep them in water to stop them from cracking. But you can see the spectacular pink color when the rocks are wet. And there you are.
That's
So
so cool.
yeah, and I picked that one just for Jess because it matches her.
I'm very color coordinated with your pet rocks
Okay.
today. Yeah.
So yeah, she's fully coordinated.
I love that. That is amazing. Oh, well, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited to hear your talk. So let's get stuck in. If you want to share your screen.
So the title of my talk today, Systems Thinking for Discovery. So about a long time ago, really, I got very disheartened with the rates of discovery, particularly in Australia. And I realized that, we needed to have some sort of paradigm shift. And I didn't have anything that would help until somebody called John Hronsky came along in 2011 and mentioned the concepts of self-organizing systems, which really kind of threw me and made me think very deeply about, well, how do mineral systems actually work, or mineralizing systems. So the journey started when I left mainstream geoscience and management 8 years ago and set up my own consultancy. And since then, I've run a number of workshops, some under the guise of thinkcafe.org, which were all not for profit, some under Think Events, where I try and make enough money to keep going, and a whole lot of alumni from those events who very actively contributed to the thinking. And I also want to recognize Bruce Hobbs and Alison Orr. Bruce and Alison are my current mentors in this field, and Bruce, if you know him, is a very generous person, and they both are. All of their ideas are published on the Mineral Dynamics website. So I do encourage you to check those out, or previous GeoHug by Alison, which I won't particularly reference, but I would say it's some of the ideas in that are a bit more advanced than some of the things I'm going to be talking about today. So today's more of a starting at the beginning and ending up to the what's next. And I think there is a what's next, because this is an eight-year journey for me. It might be an 8-minute journey or eight for you before you start falling asleep. But hopefully you'll keep going with me, and I'll be saying some really confronting things to you over the next hour or so, and hopefully you'll say some confronting things back to me in the Q&A after that. So here we go. Now, can I move this forward? So this is the thing that we've got to get over. Risk and discovery rates. So we talk about this all the time, and nobody seems to have a very good solution. We take 500 to 1,000 exploration projects, of which we maybe get 100 through to an advanced stage, i.e. drilling. Out of that, maybe 10 development projects come, and then one profitable mine. So the ratio from projects to mines is about 1 in 500 or more. And we really need to change that picture. We need to be able to go in a different order to that. If we continue to go like this, we will go bust, because people just aren't prepared to give us the money anymore. And the other thing is, what happens if your one profitable mine isn't a tier 1 deposit, it's only a tier 2, or worse still, a tier 3 deposit, and it's under deep cover. then you haven't actually even paid back all the money that you spent getting there to explore it. So it is a real problem, and we really do need to think about it very deeply. And systems thinking is, I believe, one of the keys to changing that picture. So this is the journey we're going to go on this afternoon. You'll be sitting at home or at work, wherever you are, in your little comfort zone, drinking a coffee or your wine or whatever, and I need to take you to where the magic happens. The only problem with that is that you're probably going to suffer psychological discomfort on this journey. I'm giving you fair warning. This isn't a bit like the Yellow Brick Road. You will meet lions, tin men, and wizards. But let's start on, why we want to talk about systems in the first place. Well, think about the supercontinent cycle. And here's a diagram published by Graham Begg in 2017, based on the previous one by Groves et al. And you can see those brown bars, and every 800 million years or so, since the Archean, there has been the amalgamation of a supercontinent. And then we can see, looking at the colored bars at the bottom, that various different magmatic deposits seem to be associated with different phases of supercontinent amalgamation. So what we're seeing, you can just look at my hands, is that supercontinents are coming together, then they're splitting apart, they're coming together again, they're splitting apart, and we've seen this at least 4 times since the Archean. And what's causing that? Well, we have a system with delays. Anything that's periodic like that is usually indicates a system with delays. And the delay we're seeing is the fact that the graveyard of slabs, subductic slabs, pops down to the core mantle boundary and effectively blankets it. And then heat builds up, and those slabs then melt or break up, and we see plume outbreak from the core, and that then is able to split up the supercontinent that sits over the top. And that sounds fairly simplistic, which it is, and I'm not going to go into that anymore. But let's have a look at the next slide. It wasn't always like this. So the other thing is to bear in mind is that planetary systems and processes evolve over time. So prior to 3GA, or 2/3 of the age of the Earth ago, we didn't have modern plate tectonics. We didn't have supercontinents. We did have accretionary origins. We did have subduction. We definitely would have had plumes. But there were some subtle differences that made all the difference. So whilst you can see a lot of the features there look the same, we've still got a core, we've still got a surface of the Earth, we've still got upper and lower mantles, and et cetera, and plumes and the subducting plates, but the tectonics was different. And so systems evolve, and planetary systems evolve, and we know that there are certain types of deposit which are formed and during particular tectonic periods and at particular times in Earth's history, and then they really haven't been formed much since. We also see periodic systems in the financial side of our business. So if we think about mining and exploration in terms of money, most of us who've been around for a while would know that if you don't get your discovery advanced and developed and into a mine and delivered, so you usually get money when the price is high. Well, if you don't get the mine into production while the price is still high, then you miss the wave and you end up on the left-hand side here as a stranded resource waiting for the next super cycle to come along. On the other hand, if you can get going really quickly, and an example of that might be Western mining after the discovery of Kambalda, or more recently, Sirius Resources with the discovery of Nova Bollinger, get it into production as quickly as possible, and you can then surf the price wave. and you paid off your capital while the prices are still good. You also have the opportunity, like Aluko Resources, if you control enough of the market, say for zircon, then you can actually shape the market. In other words, you can actually design the wave so it suits your needs. But if you pay too much for an opportunity at the peak of the market, then you'll get smashed. And your investors will run away, and you possibly won't get to do it again because they will have lost confidence in you. So that's talks about the periodicity of boom and bust, and it's unstoppable. It's the way the system is built. It's a fundamental part of the system. You can't change it. The only way you could change it would be to change the paradigm of the system. In other words, get rid of capitalism. So that's the only way to change what we have in our. So there we are. Why complex systems? Well, we want to think about complex systems because ore deposits are formed by complex systems. So, and they're not just formed by simple systems, they're very complex. Lots of different factors come into play, which is why big deposits are so rare. And the important thing in this list, which comes from the New England School of Complex Systems, is conventional approaches simply don't work. You cannot use Newtonian physics, you cannot use calculus, you cannot use statistics. They simply don't work. And that can be very confronting to people, especially people who work in resource modeling, part of our industry. Sorry, guys, there is no such thing as the average grade of an ore deposit. Doesn't work. So what are we up against? Well, on the left, we have pretty much where most of the industry sits, which is a reductionist approach to understanding mineralizing systems. And with a reductionist approach, this only works for a few people. In other words, maybe a few academics or one or two mining companies. It doesn't work for most people, and it doesn't work for the environment in which this operates. Whereas the systems approach thinks about the whole system and the dynamics, particularly the dynamics, the changes, and the links between those systems. And if you have a systems approach, it can work for everybody, and it can work for the whole environment and the whole value chain. So on the right-hand side, you can have win-win. On the left-hand side, you always get win-lose. Another reason why we need to change. Next thing I want to talk about is errors of perception. So this is a great little figure I stole off the internet a long time ago, and I apologize to whoever created it, but I don't have the reference anymore. You can probably find it with a Google search. So if we think about viewing a cylinder, if you only view it from one direction, in other words, with particular filters on your viewpoint, then you only see a circle. And if you only view it from the side, you see a square or a rectangle. Completely different. But the actual truth is it's a cylinder. And guess what? If you walk around it and take multiple perspectives, you will see it's a cylinder. But if you stay in one place and don't move, you will only see what you've always seen. And as Edward de Bono, famous lateral thinking guru, most thinking errors are not are errors of perception, not errors of logic. So the rules of logic that were given to us by the Greeks 2,500 years ago are very, very effective tools even today. But if you don't have the right perception, then your whole argument, your whole way of thinking is biased, and you will come up with the wrong answer. So here's an example came off McKinsey newsletter only a week ago, but I thought I'd show it. This is the perceptions of risks in different regions of the world, and the bubble sizes are the risk. Okay, so the gray green. Well, it depends on how colorblind you are. Let's call the green gray brown section, column 3. There is the average of everybody, and then you've got the bluey purple colors, circles, which are each individual one. So if you were in Europe, your biggest worry would be about geopolitical instability and conflict. They've got the Ukraine war going on their eastern border. And they're also, but they're not worried at all about China's economic slowdown, because China isn't a big market for them, either sales or purchases. If you go to Asia Pacific, it's the opposite. We in Australia would say that China's economic slowdown would be a really big effect on us, a big risk. We're also thinking that geopolitics is linked to that, might be a big risk. But we're not worried about high levels of national debt. Whereas in developing markets, they're really worried about going into debt because they don't have the capital backing. So with each of those, depending on what you're thinking about, you will come to the table with a completely different set of risk perceptions. And that means you will see what you want to see, not necessarily what's really there. So the change in perception I'm going to encourage you to take is one to seek out the truth of mineralizing geosystems. And the two perspectives that we want to look at are systems thinking and thermodynamics. And if we can bring those two together, we should have a much more powerful way of looking at mineralizing systems. We won't see everything. We won't see all the dimensions, but at least we'll be seeing 3 of the dimensions pretty well. And once we glimpse that, there's no going back. Once you've seen the result of that, you won't be able to unsee it. So let's start with a very, very simple high school sort of concept of thermodynamics, which is a fire. So I'll credit Bruce Hobbs for this slide. So on the top left, we might have a smoldering fire that was built by a teenager. It's not very good. Nobody's wafting it. We've got some partially burnt timber and some totally ash timber and some completely unburnt twigs and leaves. There's a high degree of entropy there, which means it's highly disordered. It's heterogeneous, and it's not very efficient. If, on the other hand, we go to the bottom right, we've got a roaring fire in the fireplace. This is low entropy. It's very well ordered. It's very efficiently burning that wood. This is the sort of fire you'd want in your steam train to get the head of steam going. And the other ones are kind of a bit in between. So the smoldering fire, not enough inflow of medium entropy, that would be a bit like a bushfire. Bushfire's burned through, it hasn't gone out yet. You come back next week and there's absolutely nothing left. It's slowly smoldered and burnt through all of the fuel. For the candle, far too much fuel and far too much oxygen. Somebody blew at it, too much oxygen, too much fuel, and it goes out. So if you have too much inflow, we can, but it's close to equilibrium, as are both the ones on that, because they're, and these are not places we want to be. So in the reactions in nature and in geology, we don't want to be close to equilibrium, because these are the sort of systems you end up with. We want systems that are far from equilibrium because they're the ones that do the work. So if you want, for those of you who are more mathematical, want to see that nice graph, so here's again from Bruce to abscissa here, the flow rates and reaction rates, and you can see how we can get stability in various different places and different behaviors depending on the amount of flow of reactants and the ignition points. But I've just thrown that in there just to fill in time while I get ready for this one. So, the perception paradox. So I just spoke about perception, and here we are, we see a black smoker, and many people think, well, here we are, this is an example of a VMS system forming live. We can watch this in video on the seafloor today. QED, this is how VMSs form. Unfortunately, it doesn't make them easy to find in the geological record. Anybody who's explored for VMSs will tell you that. They're very small targets. They're actually very hard to find, even when you just found one and you know that there might be some others around. The next one may take you many years to find. So if that's the case, one of the logical deductions would be that studying deposits to understand how they formed may not help us very much in the quest for discovery. And the secondary conclusion from that would be is that we should stop studying them because it's not helping us. We shouldn't invest so much time and effort in PhD studies on individual deposits. We need to think about having PhD studies on regions, which is the sort of studies that people used to do back in the 1950s and 60s, before we had all these gadgets to make very fine measurements on things. So, system thinking for geoscience. I'm calling it the New Hope, which is reference to Star Wars Episode 4, if you're into Star Wars, and that's only because this weekend is May the 4th, and May the 4th be with you. Mineral systems are complex, open, multi-dimensional systems. Already said that. Operating at different scales at different times and sometimes several scales at the same time. Systems thinking is holistic thinking. It's about the interactions and process, not the individual components and actors. And it's very different from traditional reductionist thinking. And my belief is that we can much better understand complex, self-organizing, emergent, or systems if we understand the systems thinking approach. And don't be scared. Complex does not mean complicated. Some of these concepts are very easy to get your head around once you think about them. So, what are the important systems traps? Well, humans like nice linear arrangements. When I turn the heat on under my kettle, the temperature goes up. And the more heat I put under the kettle, the higher the temperature goes up until I get to boiling point, at which point the temperature stabilizes and we go through a phase change. But whilst the water's heating up, it's linear. Simple geometries. But complex systems don't behave like that. They're non-linear. Sometimes chaotic. Sometimes they can go up, down, round, and round, and back again. And they often have fractal complexity. And what was shown there, which is a snowflake, is monofractal, but they can be multifractal. Sorry. So systems understanding is one of the 5 pillars of the 5 answers for discovery, which is a talk I'll be giving in Kalgoorlie in June. And it's also the title of my book, which is coming out next year. So systems understanding contains all of this: systems theory, systems thinking, nonlinear dynamics, nonlinear mathematics, oscillations, systems levers, etc., etc. Why are we interested in? Because predictions are possible. We can move into very powerful predictive space if we use systems theory. We can predict the behavior of all systems theoretically and in the field from relatively few measurements. Now, I put this 15-point list here, not to make it difficult for you to read, but because each one of these is equally important as any other. So I'll start off. So most geosystems are multidimensional, and when I talk about multidimensional, I'm talking about 7 dimensions. Okay, 7 dimensions or more. Not 3 dimensions, not 4 dimensions, 7. So you need maths to be able to manage for 7 dimensions. They're not more than 18, because 18 is the maximum. 18 dimensions is the number of dimensions you need to understand string theory. And seeing string theory is the fundamental building block of all materials. We don't need more than 18 dimensions. Everything in a complex system is coupled and interdependent. So many of you would have heard of the butterfly effect. Yes, so because things are coupled and interdependent, a small change somewhere in the system where it's operating a very powerful lever can create major change in behavior. Not necessarily instantaneously, but sometimes instantaneously across the entire system. I already said that calculus and statistics don't work, so please park those, get some better mathematics than that. Level of complexity is the amount of information needed to describe the system. And one of the ways of reducing complexity is to create patterns, which is why we see patterns in nature, why we see patterns on the skins of animals, why we see repeated patterns on the growth of corals on the barrier reef, because they reduce complexity. And while some complex regimes are random, most of them aren't, and therefore they're predictable, even the chaotic ones, or things that look chaotic. And the larger scale you look at things, the more predictable they are. And from that point of view, giant ore systems are and should be more orderly than small deposits. Fundamentally, therefore, giant deposits are easier to explore for undercover than small deposits because they're more predictable at the large scale. And these are all universal rules of complex systems. They're not my rules. They come from systems thinking. On the other hand, power law distributions in nature and in mineral systems are very rare, or they don't exist. So we shouldn't talk about power law distributions anymore for deposits. They don't exist. Power laws can be seen over portions of the distribution, but the bit we're really interested, which is the giant deposits, don't fall on that distribution. Ashby's rule. In order to survive, a system must meet the complexity of its environment. We'll look at that a bit later. Tadkin's theorem, which is one of Bruce Hobbs's favorite. The study of one component in a reaction allows you to measure all of them. In other words, you can look at the distribution of cerussite in a gold deposit, and if cerussite is linked to reactions that deposit gold, then just by measuring the cerussite, you can actually map the gold. And it's not one-to-one mapping. This is systems mapping of where the gold should be, must be. Gall's law, all complex systems grow from simple ones, not the other way around. So trying to simplify things unless is not sensible. You have to take the complexity and embrace it. Self-organization and emergence. This is how life exists. So chemistry is an emergent property of physics. Biology is an emergent property of chemistry. Intelligence and intelligence beings like humans are an emergent property of biology. Emergence is everywhere in the universe. In fact, it's probably one of the most fundamental and interesting aspects of the universe. And whilst we're talking about the universe, the law of universality says that what you can learn from one system, you can apply to other systems, especially at the highest level. So we should be able to take information that's been gained and insights that have been gained from studying metallurgical systems, from studying solar systems, from studying all sorts of other systems, and apply them to geology. Not at every level, but there will be insights that are applicable and transferable. Redundancy is good. Paradox is a very common paradox. Being able to believe in something, in two different things at the same time that are contradictory. Scenario generation, because things are never going to be the same, this is why predicting the future is so hard, especially for people who are qualified in that, called economists. We need scenarios, and scenarios are basically based on human imagination. And all systems have a purpose, and there's a little challenge for you to think about. Maybe you can put your answers in the Q&A. What's your purpose? In the system or in your own system? So this is the challenge, and to also a bit of a wake-up call at 2 slides into quite a long talk, which is now going to go over time, but I'm going to speed up, is that if you don't move up the system thinking food chain, then Ashby's law says that you will become extinct. Okay, so if we don't take advantage of systems thinking and build on that and become systems thinkers, then our jobs will be taken over by AI and other things. So what is a system? This is definition, but the key words here are dynamic, complex, and interacting. In the self-organizational sense, this diagram originally from Horonsky's 2011 paper, this kind of misses the mark, unfortunately, with a bit of analysis, because any system that has perturbations, randomness, and fluctuation will generally self-organize to counter that, or to change and move to a different behavior. So it doesn't have to be a threshold barrier, it can be pretty much anything. And importantly, the amount of energy in the system is not proportional to the amount of self-organization. In other words, the more energy you pump in, you don't get more organization. What you get is more opportunities for more dissipation and higher energy dissipation processes to activate. And that's a diagram how it works. Initial disorder to a state of attractors is just progressive interaction and dialogue or communication between elements of the system. And part of a self-organizing system or type of self-organizing system is an emergent system. And the key thing that's different between just self-organization and emergence is that the communication has the aim of regulation, balance, or control. So That's why things emerge to regulate, balance, or control the system. Here's a quote from the father of systems thinking, and for those of you who've been watching Netflix, he was also the originator of the concept of the three-body problem, a mathematician and polymath. But here, this quote: "Science is built up with facts, as a house with stones, but it's a collection of facts is no more science than a heap of stones is a house." So using the metaphor of a car instead of a house, at the top we have reductionist science, where we pull the car apart, we try to understand how it works, but you can't understand how fast it goes. And if you take all the best bits from different cars, you don't end up with an ideal car, you just end up with a mess. The system requires all of the components to be there, and a modern car has, over 200, 300 microprocessors in it. You take any of those out, it doesn't work anymore. And if you cut a car in half, you don't get two small cars, you get two wrecks. So superimposed systems in geology, we see these all the time. So here we are, we can see the Cadillac at the bottom of this, or it's a Buick, I think, actually, at the bottom of this pile. This is what we have to see through when we go back in geological time: superimposed systems, geosystems that have deformed earlier geosystems that have deformed earlier geosystems. And the real reason we need systems thinking, not event-oriented thinking, is that's the way the world works. And the diagram on the left isn't the way the world works. So event-oriented thinking suggests that if you have, say, a source rock A and a source of energy B, and we combine them and we send them up a conduit C, and then we might get deposit D. That's not the way systems work. Systems work like the right-hand side, where the actual things controlling the system are not the components. It's the connections and feedback loops between those components, so the behaviors, and there are no root causes. There are no source rocks. There are no traps. One of the ways of analyzing a system is to build a map. And with a map, you can find the right leverage points and you can work with others. You can describe it. Linear thinking, you have a tool and you hit, the hammer hits the nail. That's the contrast between making maps and not making maps. Here's a system analysis map, so it's designed to help people make decisions. On the left-hand side, we've actually got stock and flow mapping. So you've got boxes and arrows and taps moving data and information. But the other loops are all causal loops that link between that. They're effectively influencing those movements. But if you don't decide what your system analysis or your map is for, you won't build it in the right way, and therefore you won't be useful to answer the question. So you should always have focusing questions. And here are a whole lot of perceptions of mineral systems from 1995 to 2003. None of these is a systems map because none of them have feedback loops, and many of them are unhelpful or should be abandoned, as I will now talk about. If we look at the most recent one, this is the famous project GATES concept. The reason why this isn't a system map is that it's basically a linear map. It's a flow diagram. There's no feedback loops. There's no time mapped onto here. And there's no consequences at the other end. Mineralization is at the top of the diagram, but it doesn't say what happens next. What happens when that mineralization is weathered, dispersed. any of that get recycled? How does this link to the plate tectonics system? Don't know. If we go back to the original Wyborn publication, this was based on oil system models, and we must stop using it. I would like to see nobody publish this ever again, because it's fundamentally unhelpful, because it's based on oil, and hydrothermal systems, magmatic systems, and lateritic systems that form our great ore deposits in the world do not behave like this. So let's start. First of all, traps. First person to point this out to me was actually Bruce Hobbs. We don't want to trap hydrothermal or magmatic fluids. We want them to flow through. We need reactors, not traps. We need focus, not trapping. As soon as you trap a fluid, you stop it moving and the system is dead. No traps. In many cases, we don't need enriched source rocks. Let's take the example of nickel sulfide deposits. Just your average common or garden mantle will do. And guess what? The mantle is everywhere underneath every bit of crust and every bit of ocean. Energy and driving forces always seem to come in at the beginning, but that's a fallacy too, because often it's the sun, which is the main source of energy, because it drives the hydrosphere and the biosphere. And we also get energy from deformation, and we can get energy generated in the depositional environment, which is after all was I called it a reactor. And sometimes there's absolutely no fluid discharge whatsoever. There's no halo. You can be a meter away from a massive sulfide deposit and not be able to detect it geochemically. So in many cases, these are not working, and in some cases, there are no source rocks, because actually the source rocks in the depositional environment as well. Think of a lateritic nickel deposit. The dunite was already there. It was the silica that left, and the manganese, magnesium. Coupled reactions in these reactors. Just have a look here. Muscovite. Muscovite creates generation muscovite creates an enormous amount of energy. So phyllosilicate alteration is a sign of a massive amount of energy being generated in the reactor. And that energy can be used to do other things like deposit quartz, because without energy, you can't deposit quartz, you can't deposit sulfides. Quite often, what we call alteration or waste is actually the key to depositing our metals. And unfortunately, it gets worse. Okay, so I asked Richard Shoddy to provide me with all of the tier 1 and tier 2 deposits that he recognizes having been found since 1995, which is when Leslie's paper was published. And the question I said that I was going to check into was, how many of these deposits were actually found using mineral systems? And we workshopped this in February at the Science and Discovery Workshop. And this is the answer that the group came up with. So it's 42 geoscientists from VP Exploration, Bruce Hobbs, Alison Ord, myself, Steve Beresford, and many others. So the answer is only one was found with mineral systems, and that is Hemi. Julimar fell off the list because it's actually been downgraded to a tier 2 based on the scoping study. But more than that, if you look at the key data sets that resulted in the discovery, actually, the actual leverage point in the system of exploration. There's only, again, one out of that 11, and that's Julimar, that really used pre-competitive data, because the others are either brownfield, using proprietary data, or you've got 3 LCT pegmatites, which you could have seen spodumene, and they were tantalum tin deposits before, and they suddenly became, or Mount Holland was a gold deposit, and they suddenly became a different deposit overnight. So that's tier 1s. And you say, oh, Tim, but there's a whole lot of other discoveries. Well, this represents 65% of the wealth generated in that 29 years. So when we're looking for systems or intersystems, we want to get away from anomaly picking. Here's Mount Isa Eastern Succession, plenty of magnetic anomalies there. Here is Cornwall. If we just look for anomalies, we'll go bust. If we look for patterns, we're looking for system processes. Here in Cornwall, we've got these magnetic features, which are the magnetic material created by contact metamorphism, which suggests that these magnetic low areas, which are granites, were in high thermal disequilibrium with the rocks into which they came, which is what we want, because we want granites that come into the upper crust. Tin granites come up as high as porphyry systems do. This is the radiometrics, which shows the internal zonation within some of these granites much better than the magnetics does. And then if we look at the tin over the top of that, you can see the correlation between the tin in stream sediments and those features. We always, when we're building a map, want to think about a concept called isomorphy, which is having the right level of detail effectively. So on the left, we have a photograph of Denver. On the right, we have a map of Denver. But if we zoom into this, it won't tell you what the names of all these small streets are, but it's quite okay to find your way from downtown out to DIA airport. So depending on what your need is with your map is how much detail you stick into it. Here's the tube map of London, but it doesn't really look like that because that's a true map of the tube map of London. That's a GIS version of the tube map of London. That's a bit harder to visualize and to remember, so we don't look at it that way. But it's higher isomorphy. Looking at tin, start off with all of the visual things that you can find out at every scale. This is the very first tin systems map and systems map with stock and flow map. Each one of these rectangles is a stock, and the flow through these processes to move to the other level. This bit is the sedimentary portion. This is the granite portion. This is the ore portion. I'm just looking at the sedimentary subsystem. We're weathering clays from previous orogenic cycles. We want the most intense weathering because we want to get all of the tin out and stick it into clays, or absorb it onto clays and send it down a river system and out into a passive margin. What's driving this? It's the sun. It's not being driven by the planet, it's being driven by the sun. Thing which is being driven by the planet is breaking up that maybe lateritic profile due to tectonic movements, so that we can get more of the saprolite and other things to move down the river. Some of that may go out onto a floodplain, but we all know that floodplains have meanders, so it can come back again. Some of it may get blown out in the deep ocean, go down the subduction zone, go around again. In the granite level, and if you're going very fast through this, you can download this from my LinkedIn page, is that eventually we get to a level in the crust, in the upper crust, where things just happen. There's so many fluxes and so much fractionation has gone in the granite that some sort of tin deposit is inevitable. And then the question is, what sort of tin deposit? And you always get 2 for 1. You always get sedimentary or placid deposit. And then all of that stuff goes, guess where? Back down the river system again. So from that point of view, just looking at this, there are no source rocks. There are no traps. There are simply reservoirs, and the metal moves through those reservoirs and may be at any one time in any one of those boxes. So why move to a new paradigm? Well, this is perhaps where we are at the moment, and these are the 5 answers. We've got systems theory, we've got our culture, exploration culture, access to money, and access to ground. And the problem is that all of these things are outgrowing our existing paradigm. And our paradigms in each case are broken. We can't cope with this system any longer. We have to change. We have to come up with a new paradigm. And we need to do that because we need to follow Ashby's law. For the system to survive, it must have a matching complexity to the environment that it is in. So that means that we have to rise to the occasion. We have to understand systems theory and mineralizing systems better. We have to build the right cultures. We have to gain access to ground, and we have to access much more money than we're currently accessing, because most of it is being wasted. How do we know that paradigm shifts are required? Because they're the very highest level. They're the thing that talks to the purpose of the system. The purpose of exploration and discovery is to create wealth, not wealth just for shareholders, wealth for all, and to supply the needs of the human race on the planet, whilst at the same time preserving the planet and the environment that we're operating. I'm going to skip through all these. I just wanted to talk to this slide, perhaps before I zip to the end. This is a version, I guess, of the one on the previous, this top diagram here from McQuaig. Essentially, at the regional scale, we mostly predictive, a little bit of detection, maybe when we have a total, which is the gray line. And as we go to the right, once we get to the prospect scale, detective techniques are superbly effective. You just drill everything. So actually, that's what it looks like. But when you combine those lines, you still end up with this valley of death at the camp scale, which is the key scale. And we desperately need to lift that line up. So we need new techniques. They're not going to come from the left-hand side from prediction, and they're not going to come from detection techniques we already have. They're going to be new techniques. And that will require a revolution, a new paradigm. That requires change. If you apply a linear approach to change, it'll be like shaking the tree without affecting the roots. You can cut the tree down and the tree will just come back the same way as it used to, unless you understand what you're dealing with below. So I've talked about systems theory. Then there's nonlinear dynamics. That's what Alison Ord talked about in her talk, and pattern formation. Networks, we need to go there. And evolution and adaptation are also somewhere that we need to go, because if you read all the fine print there, it's all about machine learning and AI. So if any of you feel worried, don't be, because this is actually a new dawn, a new opportunity. And I might just add that we need to get back to basics as well as go to the forefront of ideas. Field work used to be thought of as the thing that geologists did. Now it's something they do when they go on holiday. Make sure that we bring this back. And the great thing about information is that you don't need big data as long as you've got an imagination, because imagination is more important than knowledge. Being creative in our science is key, and creativity can be trained. Okay, you don't just have to go out and find artistic people. You can find strategic people and make them more creative. You can find mathematical people, make them more creative. I'm just going to skip over this. What's next? So today was about systems theory. Targeting science overlaps with that. So once you understand your systems, how do you translate that into a targeting methodology? Targeting always overlaps with business strategy and exploration practice, the practical aspects of what you're going to do. And so that's really the environment. And Nick Hayward and I are going to run a workshop in December, which is already up on the thinker.events webpage, called Targeting Science. And any of you who are interested should come along to that. Remember Ashby's law. If you don't evolve, then you're putting yourself at risk of being replaced by AI, probably. And that, after a little over an hour of your valuable time, I apologize for going over time. It's time for questions.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Tim.